All right, Marathon 105. I can't believe it. This is the only YouTube channel where the host mispronounces 90% of the places and probably half of the names of the people who write in. But that's okay because these are good stories. And I've got 4 awesome, they really are awesome. I'm not just kidding about it. I'm not just blowing smoke. These are great stories. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but you guys, if you like really good stories, these are good ones. We got birthday wishes at the end, so if you like that kind of thing, hang on till the end. Got 8 or 10 people we're going to say happy birthday to, and that is always so much fun for me. So let's get rolling with this video. All right, here we go. Here's a story from Indiana. We don't get too many stories from Indiana, and I like running up on these areas where there's not just a ton of activity. It kind of lets you know that these things are everywhere. My name is Isaac, and I'm 18 years old, and I live in Montgomery County, Indiana. I got this email probably a year ago, so Isaac is probably 19 now. My encounter isn't super action-packed or fast-paced, and it's not even in Dixie, but it embedded something deep within me. I have been fascinated by Bigfoot from a young age. As a kid, my family were cattle people, and one day my dad was watching a History Channel show called Monster Quest about cryptids. This specific episode was about cattle mutilations, which hooked him, but he soon got bored after he realized it was what he called BS and he left the room. However, I was glued to the screen. The next episode was about the skunk ape, and since then I have been enthralled by Bigfoot. I've read books, looked at websites, and of course I watch YouTube videos. You and Bob Gimlin produce the most enjoyable content on this subject. Thanks, Isaac. Bob Gimlin is awesome. I love that guy's channel. He really does do a good job. Anyway, I was hooked. The only access to the deep forest I had was my grandmother's house in southern Indiana. She had Wi-Fi and my family didn't, so when I wasn't online looking at websites and videos about Bigfoot, I was scanning her tree line, hoping to catch a glimpse of one. It was late July of 2008. I was in the 2nd grade and I was sitting in the back seat of the family car going through the mile or 2 of forest leading to Grandma's house. I was in my own little world. My little sister had a Game Boy, my 2 older siblings had iPods, my dad was driving and Mom was asleep in the front seat. I was staring out the window to pass the time, and that's when I saw it. There was a dark figure crouched in a ditch below the road to the car's right. It was scooping water into its mouth. It didn't have a weapon, and it had a shaggy look all over its body, so if it was a hunter, it was a pretty stupid hunter. It seemed relaxed, actually swooping its long arms into the small stream formed by the pond's overflow. I saw it for 2 seconds or so before both the car and the tree line turned just enough to block my view. I said, "I saw it, guys. There was something in the ditch." But nobody heard me except my dad, who is the most cynical and no-nonsense person alive, and he still is, but I do love him. To this day, I'm not 100% sure if what I saw was a Sasquatch. If it was a hunter, he wasn't very bright. I've seen ghillie suits, and this was too even and flowing to be one unless it was some sort of Navy SEAL or something. I'm certain that I saw a figure, and using context clues of the smaller details, I'm mostly certain that it was a Bigfoot. Maybe if I got a better look, I could be totally sure. But that's the closest that I've come to seeing one. I've heard what I think are calls, but again, I can't be sure. I still believe these creatures exist. I believe that they have for many centuries before us, and I'm even more fascinated by them. In one way, I hope they are never officially discovered. I think they should be left alone. We humans are too destructive and we're not ready to coexist intelligently with these creatures. All in all, I'm curious to learn more about Sasquatch. I hope one day to see one so that I can be completely sure. To this day, I go to her house and look at that spot, and I remember where my curious childhood study became a serious adult fascination. Oh, Isaac, that was a great story, man. You're 19 years old now. You're really a good writer. I mean, just set aside the story. You're very good at expressing yourself and making things very clear so we all understand what your encounter was. And then to the story, I drive around and I think if I ever saw something, even when I'm back in the woods with the dogs or if I'm back there fishing or messing around in the woods, I always figure if I see something, it will be just a split second. It'll be just a brief encounter. And I think probably that's what most people have. I don't think they're long drawn out encounters. But that was a great story, Isaac, and I really appreciate you writing it and the way you wrote it. Good job, buddy. All right, here's a story from South Carolina. This is really good. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever read one quite like this. I think you're going to love it. It's actually very exciting. The writer's name is Roxy. She says, "My name is Roxy, and I apologize for any misspellings and punctuation." Roxy, don't you worry about it. I got you all fixed up in this story. I got it all corrected. You're about to find out why she had to do this so quick. She says, "Our 6-month-old daughter is napping, and I'm not sure how long she will be down, so I'm doing this in a hurry." I got this email about a year ago, so her daughter is now 18 months old. And Roxy, I understand all that. Don't worry about it. Anybody else sending in stuff, just know it takes time to edit these stories, but I'm going to get to every one of them. So let's get into the rest of her story. She says, "I'm an avid listener to your channel, Vic Cundiff's channel, and the Paranormal Roundtable. I haven't had an encounter, but my father and stepmother have. They have worked on a farm in South Carolina for years, and they're close to the family and the animals that they keep. When I was younger, I would go to the farm and help out. I loved being around the animals, and especially my best friend at the farm, which was a male donkey. I am an adult now, but my parents still work there. On a summer day, my dad was doing some work on the rabbit pens. He needed to pee, so he walked over to a tree close to the pens and urinated. At the time, he had a kidney infection, and he noticed that his urine had a strong odor. The infection was miserable for my dad, but he kept working until late that night. The next morning, when he returned to finish the job, he saw that the 2x4 floorboards from one of the pens had been torn out. The rabbits were gone. He searched the area to figure out what had happened. None of this made any sense. Walking over to the tree where he had peed the day before, he found the boards laying in perfect rows with the nails turned up. He didn't know it at the time, but this was a warning from the creatures who lived in the area that he had crossed the line peeing on their territory. But at this point, he had no idea Bigfoot were in the area. He would soon discover this terrifying truth. A few days later, he was working close to one of the animal pens, and he had a water hose in his hand. When he reached the length of the hose, it jerked from his hand and it fell to the ground. He bent over to pick it up. A loud whoosh zipped directly over his head as he was bent over, and a softball-sized rock smashed into the ATV directly in front of him. The rock broke through the plastic fender, causing a lot of damage to the vehicle. He stood up, turned to see what was going on, but he saw nothing behind him. The woods were 50 or 60 yards behind him, and he studied the area carefully. Something had thrown that rock, but what could it have been? He never saw anything, but later admitted that he felt eyes on him the whole time. It was difficult for him to explain. He said that something was in those woods and that he felt it, almost as if he could actually see it. He made a judgment call to do some work in another area of the farm that day. He would again soon find out what had thrown that rock. Not long after this, my stepmother was with him while they did their daily jobs on the farm. She was close to the trees at one point, and she felt uncomfortable for some reason. She felt something close to her that didn't belong. It was a primal instinct that danger was close, so she stopped her work and looked into the woods for a few minutes. To her surprise and terror, a Bigfoot stepped into a clearing in between some trees and revealed itself. She was in complete shock, and she stood there for a few seconds before realizing that she needed to move. Back with my father, she described what she had seen. My dad believed her, and they became aware of their surroundings for the rest of that summer. They now knew what they were dealing with. My father was working in the cattle field bush hogging late one evening. I got a text from him stating that he had just witnessed a murder. I almost lost it when I read this, and I called him to find out what had happened. The following is what he told me. I left the field and I needed to close the gate and walk across the gravel to get to the tin building. I was engrossed with my work, not paying attention to things around me, when I heard a tree branch snap from behind me towards the cattle field where I had just been running the tractor. I turned and I saw 2 deer grazing in the field. That was nothing unusual, so I just went about my business. I had to go behind the tin building for a rake when I heard another snap of a branch. I looked back to the area again, and the deer were motionless, heads high, tails up, looking into the woods. Something was there, and they didn't like it. But not knowing what it was, they stood in the field and waited. A violent scene unfolded in front of me. There was a huffing noise at first. It sounded nothing like the usual noises on the farm. Footsteps, more accurately, stomps, followed, and they became audible, and I could feel the ground shake. Something strange was in those woods. By this time, I knew his text to me meant something totally different than I had assumed. And then he went on to describe the event. I saw 2 deer get slaughtered right in front of me, he said. It happened in the blink of an eye. A huge, dark figure sprinted into the field. Dust and clods of soil arched behind it as it ran. It was so fast that the creature seemed like a blur. Before the deer could react, the creature smashed into the closest deer, killing it instantly and driving that deer into the next. The second deer lay on the ground, crippled, but was killed quickly when from the ground the creature reached to its throat and snapped its neck. Both deer lay dead in the field with one enormous Bigfoot rising above them. It made a call, a subtle grunt to the woods where another creature stepped out into the field. They began ripping limbs from the dead animals and eating them. I was close enough that I could smell the blood and the sinew, and I could clearly hear the cracking of the bones. And my first question to my father was, "Did you get a picture, Dad?" He said no, that he was in shock and the thought never crossed his mind. I understood what he meant, and I was glad that he paid close attention and he remained alert. He went on to say, "I know that they knew that I was there, but the beasts were more interested in the deer than they were in me. I was thankful for that." I had 100 questions for my dad, but mainly I wanted to know that he was okay. He then went on to say, "I don't know how long I watched them devour their kill. It must have been an hour. Soon it was dark and I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. I didn't want to move from my position and draw their attention to me, so I sat tight and I waited. When the crunching of the bones and the subtle grunts finally stopped, I waited several more minutes. There were no lights on the building, and I didn't have a flashlight. I had not planned to stay until after dark, but my tractor was still in the field several yards away from the kill site. So I cautiously walked to the tractor without any incident. I started the engine and turned the tractor so that the lights would shine on the area where the Bigfoot had been. The creatures were gone, and 2 mangled deer carcasses lay in the field, partially eaten. I drove to the deer and I loaded them in the front bucket, and then I hauled them to an area where we left cattle that had died and dumped what was left of the deer. Look, I know this is an unbelievable story, but if you knew my father, you would know that the man does not lie and make up weird stories. He is a quiet man who only speaks when he is spoken to. He has been that way all his life. My father is rarely shaken, but he was very nervous during our conversation. I believe every word that he said. He now carries a sidearm with him at all times while working in that area. After these events, they had other sightings and encounters that were brief. There was no aggression from the creatures. My father says they have tried to go about their business and show the creatures that they mean no harm. They have adjusted a few of the things that they used to do that seemed to provoke the beast, and they've had no additional nerve-wracking encounters. For me, I have always felt a bit uncomfortable at this place, even though I do love the animals that are kept there. So it is a bittersweet experience for me, and even though I have not had an encounter on this place, I know there are strange things going on there. I have not included the supernatural or the paranormal things that we have all seen and experienced. I wanted to focus on the Bigfoot encounters because that seems to be the stories that people are interested in on your channel. However, if you couple the supernatural events with the appearance of Bigfoot on this place, it is easy to assume the two are connected in some way. If you choose to share these events on your channel, that is great, and if not, I appreciate that you even read them. I love your videos, and my 6-month-old seems to like it as well. I go to your videos frequently throughout the day. I hope you will continue creating videos on this subject matter. Well, Roxy, that's the plan. I'd love to keep doing this because I have so much fun, because I get access to these awesome stories by you. I mean, this was unbelievable, and even though you've not had an encounter, you absolutely believe your mom and dad, and I do too. I mean, those quiet people that really don't say much, I know a lot of those people, and when they speak up, people usually listen. But this is crazy. I've never heard a story where a person witnessed the killing of deer, especially in this manner, and that these things would come out in the field and just feed on these animals right in front of a human. I mean, that's awesome. They're bold. These are some bold Bigfoot. And then there's the connection with the paranormal. I don't know what that is, but there are a lot of people that believe that that Bigfoot and those supernatural things are connected in some way, and maybe they are. I don't know. All that said, this was a great story, and I'm glad I finally got to it, and I really appreciate you sending it to me, Roxy. And I hope your little 1.5-year-old girl is doing good and not keeping you up all night. And I hope your mom and dad are well, too. So thanks for the story. Here's a story from Northeast Pennsylvania. The writer's name is Brad, and here's what he says. I came across your channel a couple of days ago, and I absolutely love it. I've been listening to all of your videos before I go to sleep at night. I wanted to tell you about my encounter 3 years ago during the spring of 2016. This is another email that I've reached back and grabbed from a year ago. That's how far behind I am, so it would be 4 years ago now. He writes, I told my husband about it, but he just laughs at me. But I know what happened, and I will never deny what happened that cool spring afternoon. My name is Brad, and I was 25 years old at the time of my encounter. At the time, I was living with my mother-in-law in Northeast Pennsylvania. She owns 64 acres of woods on the side of a mountain. On the other side of that mountain are hundreds of acres of untamed wilderness. Every type of wildlife lives there, as you would expect, and I'm familiar with all of them. I would say that I was quite adventurous, but since my encounter, not so much anymore, and if I go in the woods, I never go by myself. It was a cool afternoon, and the snow had melted maybe 2 weeks prior. It was warm enough for me and my dog to go on a nice walk up the old logging trail that leads to the top of the mountain. My dog's name is DW, and he is a 150-pound Rottweiler. He is the best dog that I've ever had. He is obedient, and he is not afraid of anything. He stays right with me while on our walks. I realized that it was getting warmer and I didn't want to startle a sleepy bear, so as we walked, I threw hand-sized rocks in front of us so as not to startle one. We got to a pond and we stopped so DW could get a drink before starting up the incline again. As we approached the bend in the trail, we were hit with an awful odor. It was like rotten eggs mixed with skunk and death. I played it off as a skunk, and I grabbed another rock and threw it on the path, making a loud smacking noise. DW started growling. I have never heard him growl like this before. He stepped into the woods and he was growling, looking right in front of where we had stopped, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard something fly through the woods and land between DW and I. A large rock rolled past my feet. DW started barking frantically, going further into the woods, but still, I saw nothing. The woods on either side of this path are thick, with old oak and birch trees with a lot of undergrowth. But it was early spring and there were no leaves on the trees, and I still couldn't see anything unusual. If something was there, I should have seen it. I turned back to head to the house. Meanwhile, DW was still in the woods barking and growling. I heard something else flying through the woods again, and this time it landed right in front of me. Another baseball-sized rock. I got real nervous and I started down the trail to get out of there. DW came sprinting up behind me out of the woods. His hackles were up and he was whimpering. I had never seen this dog this afraid. I'm not sure what he saw, but he blew right past me running down that trail, crying the whole time. When I saw him running and crying, I did not stick around to see what it was, and I ran quickly down the trail back to the house. Again, my dog is not afraid of anything. He'll run right up to black bears that are 3 times his size. So whatever he saw in those woods scared him. I had heard of Bigfoot in our area, but I brushed it off as folklore. I did some reading and internet searches, and I found that rock throwing is common behavior with Bigfoot. The summer before, there were loggers that cleared the top of the mountain to make way for a windmill. Sometimes I wonder if the Bigfoot was warning us not to go up any farther because the loggers had disturbed their home. But I'm really not sure. My dog saw what it was, and he's not saying anything. I apologize and hope my encounter makes sense, and I'm not good at typing or storytelling, but this is the truth, and it happened 3 years ago. Actually, 4 years ago. I do not go in the woods alone, and I will never go at night. You can use my name in this story if you like, Mr. Dixie. Do you think I encountered a Bigfoot? I still don't know what to make of it to this day. Thank you so much for reading and have a great day. Well, Brad, first, I don't know what else would throw rocks just randomly in the woods. I mean, I have never walked through the woods, and I walk in the woods a lot. I've never had anything like a rock thrown at me ever one time. I would think if a big baseball-sized rock landed in front of me or hit me or whatever, I would immediately assume it was a Bigfoot because, I mean, nothing else has hands that can grab a rock and chunk it like that. So I think you probably did encounter a Bigfoot if you add that to the way your dog was behaving. DW wasn't afraid of anything. I'm thinking you were within proximity of a Bigfoot there, and I think your instinct is right. They just probably wanted to get you out of there. And I think they know that throwing these rocks from, places where people can't see where they're coming from shakes people up and it makes them leave. And I think that's probably what was going on. But Brad, thanks for the story. Sorry it took so long to get to it, but we're going to get to all of them. And we got to yours right now. And you did a great job on it. Thanks, buddy. Here's a story from southern Kansas, northern Oklahoma. The writer wants to be anonymous. This is a really good story. I've lived in southern Kansas, northern Oklahoma all my life. During the 1970s and 80s, my friends and I worked, played, and hunted anywhere that we could get permission, or anywhere nobody would catch us. We saw and heard about every type of creature that lived in or passed through the area. There were places we loved to go. There were places we didn't like to go. There were places we were too scared to go because of angry landowners. And there are places that just did not feel right for some reason. After settling down and getting married, my wife, who wasn't from here, decided that she wanted to live here, which was okay with me, so we purchased an old house in town and we started having kids. In the mid-1990s, with a growing family, we decided to buy a bigger home and raise our kids in the country. I had visions of them running wild like I did, exploring the creek beds, old barns, railroad tracks, ponds, and wherever else seemed interesting. I also fully expected them to come home with pets that would make their mama scream just like we did. The place we bought was much bigger than our house in town, and it came with some acreage and a metal building that I used for a shop. The house sat on a small hill, and rolling down on either side across the pastures was a creek 200 yards on the east side and west side, and that set the perimeter of the property. These creeks crossing the dirt road on the north end of the property 1/8 of a mile apart wrapped around the acreage and met at a 1/4 mile back on the south end, making the land a triangle shape. The convergence of the waterways created one larger, heavily wooded, swampy area covering a couple of sections of ground stretching southward into Oklahoma. The East Creek was thinly lined with willow trees and cottonwoods, while the west was thick and dense with the previously mentioned trees. The West Creek also had a lot of dead wood on the ground caused by a tornado a few years earlier. The tree line looked like someone had taken 3 huge bites out of the top of it. The tornado came down through the treetops before destroying the house that once stood where ours is now. The destruction made excellent habitat for wildlife and created bridges across the water with the felled trees. One year after moving in, my oldest child, Jessica, who was 10 at the time, called me to her brother's bedroom one morning where she was looking out the window towards the western creek. She said she kept seeing a white trash bag hung up in the tree branches. I looked, expecting to see a fluttering white bag, but instead I saw something else. Flowing white hair from a long-haired, no-neck, long-armed man standing at the edge of the tree line looking towards the house. I told her as calmly as I could manage, "I want you to stay here and I'm going to go out and get it out of the trees." With my rifle, I exited the house hoping that it had left, but when I reached the pasture, it was still there. My heart began to race and I hesitated, not knowing what it wanted and not wanting to shoot at it because I didn't know exactly what it was, and it wasn't showing any aggression. I kept walking towards it. I got within 30 yards and it took its eyes off the house and it looked right at me. The eyes were yellow or jaundiced like a person with a bad liver. I kept my rifle lowered and I slowed my gait, but I kept moving towards it wanting to know what it was, when like a ghost, it backed into the tree line and it vanished. Scanning the trees, I made it to the spot where it was standing, hoping to see tracks, but with all of the dead wood and heavy grass on the ground, I saw no impressions. I got an idea of how tall it was, though. I looked at the branch where we saw the trash bag hanging, and it was 2 feet above my head. I backed away from the area, I turned, and I made haste back to the house. I went inside to tell the kids not to play down there. Jessica informed me the trash bag was back in the same spot. She then told me she had seen the being before on another day while she had been playing at the other creek. She said she thought it was me standing just outside the trees and began walking towards me. She said, "Hey, Dad," when it turned and looked at her with those yellow eyes, and she realized that it wasn't me, and she ran back to the road. Oh my God, I thought, this thing has always been around and we moved into its territory. I sat our kids down and asked if they played in the woods, and they said yes. "Have you seen anybody else down there?" I asked. "Yes," they answered. I asked who and what did they look like, and one said the white trash bag man because he looked like he was wearing trash bags that blew in the wind. But my little 6-year-old son answered, "The tall man in the brown coveralls like you wear, Daddy." I tried to contain my emotions as my inner voice was screaming, "Now there are 2?" My thoughts then turned to my wife, and like any other husband I asked, "Did you tell your mother?" Because first, I didn't want her upset, and second, I didn't want to pack and move again. They told me that their mother didn't believe them and that the brown and white men had never said anything to them but only watched them play at the treehouse. My kids didn't have a treehouse. Tree houses, I asked. Can you show me the tree houses? They guided me to the south end of the property where we entered the tree line only feet away from where the trash bag man had stood. We proceeded to a fallen tree which laid across the water as a perfect bridge. The tree was so wide that we had little trouble crossing. Even after about 20 yards, we pushed through some shrubs via a deer trail and then into a clearing, and there they were. 2 wooden mounds about 12 feet tall and 20 yards apart. This was not what I expected. When they said treehouse, I envisioned a platform nailed across a couple of branches up in a tree, but these were definitely houses made from trees interwoven tightly together. There were big trees piled as a foundation, and it was very sturdy. My mind raced for an explanation, which kept coming back to the tornado and flooding, causing bunches of fallen trees to naturally bind together. But these were too tidy and intentional for random flooding to cause. Not to mention the area between them looked well worn and clean. Jessica and her younger sister Tay had claimed each one as their own, and with innocent excitement they showed me the door to these tree houses. I immediately went on high alert when I saw the opening on the closest one. It was worn from use, and it was taller than my oldest daughter, just under 5 feet and about 3 feet wide. Glancing inside, I saw a room void of anything but smooth dirt on the floor and a pile of small sticks and leaves in the rear. It was tall enough inside for me to stand upright and seemed sealed tight from the elements. I caught a strong animal smell, so I backed out of the opening and as calmly as I could told them that these houses already belonged to the people who made them, and they may not appreciate little girls claiming what they have built. I asked them not to come back here without first telling me and getting permission. They all agreed, and after my urging, we walked back to the house. Over the years, my children played in that area, even moving their colorful plastic playhouses and kitchenettes to the tree houses. I never felt my children or myself were threatened, but I still carried a rifle with me every time we went there, but I never shouldered it. They seemed to enjoy the kids playing around their huts. Once catching a glimpse of the tall brown man, he or she, I don't really know, would peer around trees on the perimeter of the clearing watching them play. This one seemed leaner with shorter brown hair. My kids would see them, they would wave and then go back to playing. I would see the trash bag man on occasion over the next decade in and around the West Creek. There was even a sighting along the nearby turnpike back in 2004 that a motorist reported of a white creature leaning on a fence that ran parallel with the road. I never said anything because I didn't want to be labeled and I didn't want them to be hunted. My wife and I still live on the property in the same house. Our children are grown and have moved away, and after several floods, the tree houses are gone. I rarely go back there, but when I do, I feel like I'm being watched. I haven't seen if the brown and white couple are still around. My middle son, now in his 20s, says that they are since he wandered down there one night during a visit a couple of years ago and he heard footsteps almost matching his. He spun around with a spotlight and he caught the bottom of a foot running away. They were always hospitable hosts to us, and come to think of it, none of our children ever were approached by any aggressive animals while playing down there. I guess they were protected by their big babysitters. Oh man, what a great story. I mean, you lived on some property with, I'm assuming these are Bigfoots. I'm assuming they are. You lived on the property with 2 Bigfoots for all those years and they never messed with you. They just kind of sat at the edge of the tree line and watched your kids. And you never felt any aggression or any apprehension about them taking your kids or anything like that. I think that's an awesome story. It's a good look into the nature of these things. And most of the times and most of the stories that I get, these things are not aggressive. They don't want to hurt people, although sometimes they do. and we don't know why. It's just I just love these really good stories. And to the man who wrote it, thank you very much. It's a great story, and you did a great job writing it for me. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Okay, birthday time. Let me get my list out here. First, we're going to say happy birthday to Miss Charlotte Keating. One of your children sent me an email, Miss Charlotte, saying that you turned 68 on August the 13th. They told me that you watch my videos a lot. Thank you, ma'am, so much for doing that. There's no way I can express how that makes me feel. I'm also told that your family calls you Nana, that you have 5 children, 22 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Whoa! Our grandkids call my wife Nana. I know exactly how much everybody loves their Nana. Miss Charlotte, I hope year 69 is the best year of your life. I wish you many more happy birthdays and years with that brood of kids that you're raising. We all appreciate you. Happy birthday, Miss Charlotte. Let's see. Jim Barker's birthday is September the 12th. Your brother Justin says, happy birthday, brother. I think I did one of Justin and Jim's stories on a dog man a while back. They were driving one night, and if I remember, they were on their way to school in Florida. They saw what they thought was a dog man in West Virginia on a cold, snowy night. I think I'm right on that story. I don't have time to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Jim, your brother Justin says happy birthday, and I say happy birthday. I hope it's a great year for you, brother. Karen Midkiff, your birthday is on September the 6th. Your husband Norman says that you like my videos and that he is your biggest fan. I think he kind of digs you. Norman's dad also watches the video. Norman says his dad has been a Bigfoot hunter for years. Thanks to the Midkiff family, but more important, happy birthday to you, Miss Karen. I hope this year is fantastic for you. Laura Morgan wants to wish her daughter Brittany a happy birthday. Brittany is going to be 30 years old on September the 14th. Brittany, your mom says I love you, Brittany, with all of my heart, and I'm so lucky to have had 30 years with you. I'm looking forward to many more. Back a few months ago, I shared Laura and Brittany's stories. Laura shared an encounter, and then Brittany, her daughter, wrote her version of the encounter. And I've got to say, Brittany, that your story was pretty much the best story I've ever written. It's the best one on the whole channel, girl. I mean, you did an awesome job, and I really appreciate you. Happy birthday, Brittany. Your mother loves you, and I think the world of you. Thank you, ma'am. And then we're going to say happy birthday to Miss Linda. I'm not going to say her last name because she's a widow woman living alone. I don't want people hunting her down in the comments and all that stuff and harassing her. That could happen. But Linda just turned 61 back in August. She had told me about her birthday in the comments of the video. And like I said in a previous video, if you guys don't email this to me, I'm likely to miss that. It's hard to keep up with all of those birthday wishes coming from different directions. And so Linda sent me an email. She said, I wanted to let you know my birthday was in August and I turned 61. And Linda and I have had some back and forth on Facebook Messenger through the months, and she's a widow and she lives alone with her fur babies. Apparently she just had her nearest relative move back to the area. She's not seen this relative in 17 years, and I'm so happy that you have some of your people close by now. Linda, my mother's a widow. She has been for 10 years, and she's sad sometimes, and she's never gotten over my father's death, and I think that's great. It's great to know that she loved my dad that much. It makes me real happy. So being a widow is not easy. You guys in the comments, make a special happy birthday to Linda. She's really a sweet lady. Happy birthday, Linda, and thank you for the Facebook messages. I think you're a peach. Tommy Birdsong is going to turn 35 on September the 8th. Tommy, your mom, Linda, wants you to know that she is your biggest fan, and she wants the world to hear her say happy birthday to you. Tommy, you got a good mother. Happy birthday to you, my brother. You better give her a big bear hug next time you see her. And last, we've got Gray Fuller down in Pineville, Louisiana. Gray is going to be 10 years old on September the 2nd. I think that's my father's birthday. My dad died about 10 years ago. His birthday's either September 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. I can't remember. their anniversary and their birthday, his birthday. No, his birthday is the 17th. Never mind, Gray. I'm just running my mouth. Hey, Gray, your father, Michael, wants to say happy birthday to you there, kid. Michael and Gray live in South Louisiana, and they just endured Hurricane Laura. Michael's asking for everyone to pray for the people in Louisiana. They don't have any power. It's difficult access getting back in there after the hurricane. It's a tough time for our friends in Louisiana, so y'all pray for them. So Gray, happy birthday. And your dad, he's giving you a big thumbs up. He's saying happy birthday, kid. September 2nd. I hope it's great for you. Okay, that's going to do it for the birthdays. Thank you all for watching the video. I appreciate you so much. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.